From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm José Daniel López. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro addressed members of the Bolivarian Armed Forces earlier Tuesday in Maracaibo. Maduro highlighted the U.S. government wants a military intervention in the country, but added that Venezuela will defend itself.
El señor Donald Trump.
The President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, has said he is prepared for a military intervention in Venezuela, as if Venezuela does not have its own defenders. This is nothing but a show of strength on their part, a dangerous one at that. We have been asking ourselves lately, what is the cause for this war that Donald Trump wants? Why against a peaceful and noble country like Venezuela? Are we a threat to the United States? Do we have weapons of mass destruction? Do we have the capacity to invade other nations? Those aren't the reasons. The reason is our oil and our gold and our natural gas. Recently, United States National Security Advisor John Bolton told the Venezuelan Armed Forces to carry out a coup d'etat, to reject the Constitution and to follow the White House's rules. But I tell them, where is the Commander-in-Chief of the Venezuelan Armed Forces? In the White House? Who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Bolivarian Armed Forces? Donald Trump? Who has the morals, the spirit, and carries the legacy of the Bolivarian Armed Forces? Is John Bolton the Venezuelan Commander-in-Chief?
Venezuela citizens in Caracas have started to collect signatures for a petition opposing the threat of U.S. military intervention in the country. The initiative was announced earlier this week by President Nicolas Maduro, who said that once the petition receives 10 million signatures, it will be sent to the White House. The rally collecting signatures will reportedly be replicated across Venezuela. Uruguay's President Tabaré Vázquez has met with the Mexican foreign minister in Uruguay. The gathering happened a day before Vázquez hosted an international meeting to discuss the situation in Venezuela. Marcelo Ebrard also tweeted a photo of the leaders of CARICOM member nations who agreed to participate in the meeting. The UN Secretary General expressed his support to the upcoming meeting in Uruguay. Antonio Guterres has insisted that dialogue is the only way to find a solution to the political situation in Venezuela. The session hosted by the European Union and the Uruguayan government will be held on Thursday in Montevideo. 13 EU and Latin American countries will participate. Political groups, social movements, and trade unions marched out outside the U.S. Embassy in Argentina. They rejected the attempted coup d'etat in Venezuela orchestrated by the U.S.
Despite the repression from the government of Mauricio Macri, which is trying to hide the Argentine people's support for the constitutional president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and the Bolivarian Revolution, hundreds of protesters demanded the end of aggression against the land of Chavez and Bolivar.
We're marching for Venezuela's sovereignty and for Nicolás Maduro. We think that you have to respect the mandate of the recently elected president. What is happening in Venezuela is ridiculous. And if there's a situation there, it's because it was provoked by the United States and Venezuelan economic groups that make the people go hungry. It's a lie that the people who are suffering are those that have left. Those who are suffering are those who stayed, saying to the U.S. that there's no place for their plans in the region.
According to the activists, the thousands of coups organized across all the continents of the world by the United States, the invasions, the bombing of civilians, and the support for the worst authoritarian regimes mean that Washington has no right to talk about dictatorships and human rights in Venezuela.
We are seeing how they're trying to articulate a position in the European Union, how the Cartel Lima countries are trying to formulate opinion in each of our countries. So we have to take to the streets, not just in Latin America, but all over the world. We have to show that the Venezuelan people aren't alone, and that the real enemy in common is United States imperialism.
The leaders of distinct political groups, social movements, and trade unions called for the march to demand dialogue, as proposed by Uruguay, Mexico, and the Vatican, as well as to avoid the tragedy caused by the North American intervention.
We support the meeting called by Mexico and Uruguay, which is going to take place in Montevideo February 7th. We are going to actively participate in this process because Latin American peace depends on how things go following this provocation and whether we can stop North American aggression against Venezuelan people and President Nicolas Maduro.
Mauricio Macri's political interference was anonymously rejected. In the whole history of the Argentine Republic, no president has ever intervened in internal affairs of another country, including during the dictatorships.
We've aided in each government peaceful solutions to conflicts. We can't throw NAFTA to the fire like Donald Trump or like Bolsonaro, both of whom are psychopaths. We demand that our president Mauricio Macri reverses his totally incorrect decision. We ask the same of the international community. There was an interesting poll today which revealed that the Argentine people want a solution through dialogue.
The protester unraveled the lie that the Argentine people support self-proclaimed President Juan Guaido and rejected his action as illegitimate, illegal and violent. They say they will continue to act to ensure that Latin America remains at peace.
Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been handed a new sentence of nearly 13 years by a Brazilian court. This is the second sentence for Lula in connection with corruption allegations. This time, a Brazilian court ruled that Lula illegally benefited from renovations on a property made by construction company Odebrecht, among others. The property wasn't owned by him. Lula has already spent 300 days behind bars due to a similar sentence. In a social media message, the president of the Workers' Party, Gleisi Hoffmann, condemned Lula's new sentence. Hoffmann said Lula is greater than his executioners and that his incarceration makes him a better candidate for a Nobel Peace Prize. And former presidential candidate of the Socialism and Liberty Party in Brazil, Guilherme Boulos, has also expressed his solidarity with Lula. Via Twitter, Boulos rejected the bias of Brazilian justice, saying the judiciary is against Lula. He has also called former president a political prisoner. Our correspondent in Brazil, Brian Mir, has more details.
On February 6th in Curitiba, interim judge Gabriela Hart sentenced former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to 12 years in prison on corruption charges involving alleged illegal reforms on a vacation property in the neighboring state of São Paulo. This is the second case levied against the former president as part of Operation Lava Jato, which is a joint collaborative effort between a local court system in Curitiba associated with Jair Bolsonaro's current Justice Minister Sergio Moro and the United States Department of Justice. And just as in the first case, which resulted in Lula being behind bars, the investigator, Sergio Moro, was unable to prove that the former president actually owned the property in question. In this case, the property is owned by a man named Fernando Bittar. Fernando Bittar is the son of one of Lula's best friends, Juca Bittar, another former union leader and former mayor of Campinas, which is one of the largest and wealthiest cities in Brazil. And the two families have been spending vacations, Christmas, and holidays together for 30 years. However, they were unable to prove that he owned the property. Another thing that legal scholars are pointing out about this case is that when the alleged reforms are said to have taken place, Lula was no longer in public office. He was no longer president. So how could there have been a quid pro quo if he wasn't a public official? And another thing that legal scholars are pointing out who criticize the political nature of Lula's prosecution in this case is that the property in question isn't within the jurisdiction of the local courts in Curitiba. It's in a neighboring state that has its own court system, São Paulo. So this is why hundreds of legal scholars, both nationally and internationally, including Queen's Counsel Jeffrey Robertson, have been calling these criminal charges against the former president as lawfare. Lawfare is the use of legal tools for political prosecution, and the fact that the man who created this investigation in the first place, Sergio Moro, is now a cabinet minister for President Jair Bolsonaro, indicates that there's some kind of political motives behind this prosecution.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Around 1,700 more Central American migrants have arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border. The people traveling with the caravan, mainly from Honduras, arrived at the Mexican city of Piedras Negras. Authorities converted several old factory buildings into shelters to house them. As the migrants await entry into the U.S., they say they do not feel free.
We feel like prisoners here. If we had known that when they brought us on those buses, they were going to come to lock us up here, we would have had to come on our own. But it is an inconvenience to be imprisoned here, and it is very uncomfortable. We cannot go out and buy anything. If suddenly we need some feminine products, there is no one who can help us. They give us what we need and they don't let us leave.
Our correspondent in Mexico, Pablo Perez, has more.
Central American migrants continue to arrive to the border between Mexico and the United States. They have mostly stopped going to Tijuana, but are choosing other cities such as Piedras Negras and Acuña, two places where there are no fences and the border can be crossed through the Rio Grande River. Over 2,000 Central American migrants have arrived in these cities. Many of them are temporarily staying in shelters. Some of them have also begun their asylum requests to enter the U.S., while others are considering getting jobs in Mexico. A number of people from the migrant caravans decided to move away from the main routes, going to the industrial city of Monterrey in Nuevo León, where relatives and friends were waiting for them. The United States have sent almost 4,000 more troops to the border, looking to stop migrants from crossing into the country. During his State of the Union address, U.S. President Donald Trump pointed again to migration as a source of problems for the U.S., painting the southern border as a place in crisis.
Guyana says ExxonMobil has made 2 additional discoveries of oil off the country's shore. Authorities say this brings the total number of discoveries on the Stabroek block to 12. Guyana intends to begin commercial exploration next year. Police have rescued 19 South American girls from a human trafficking ring in Trinidad. Officers arrested 6 people for harboring the girls ages 15 to 19 from several countries in the region. The minors were medically examined and are under police watch.
Initially, there have been 19 young ladies, all under the age of 21, most of them 15 and 16 years old, that were actually held against their will. They were basically slaves. They were released, rescued by the Special Operation Response Team last night. As I said, 19 of them, most of them 15 and 16 years old, being used as prostitutes by certain individuals.
February 6 marks the birth of Cuban revolutionary and commander Camilo Cienfuegos. Born in Havana in 1932, Cienfuegos was part of the Granma Landing, a key event in the revolution. He defeated Batista's dictatorship forces in Uruguay, and after a triumph of the revolution, became the head of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. The African Development Bank has said infrastructure development is key for the future of the continent. In its 2019 Outlook report, the bank said it will continue funding infrastructure projects across continent in order to improve competitiveness. The bank is currently funding various projects across Africa in sectors such as transportation and electricity generation. Zimbabwe's opposition leader has snubbed the president's call for dialogue. Nelson Chamisa, leader of the Movement for Democratic Change, has been calling for talks as a way of solving the country's political situation. He blamed the president for not being forthcoming, but Chamisa was the one who refused to sit down for talks.
There is need for us to get together dialogue. It takes dialogue to build a nation. It takes dialogue to move things forward. And we've always called for dialogue, but we did not have any audience because they were not willing to dialogue. It takes 2 to tango.
Nigerians who have been forced to flee their homes as a result of attacks by Boko Haram protested in the streets of Maiduguri on Tuesday. The protest came after fighters loyal to Boko Haram factional leader Abubakar Sheku stormed 2 villages on Monday, killing people and burning their homes. The Islamist group had devastated the northeast of the country since 2009, killing at least 27,000 people and displacing more than 1.8 million. 3 people were killed and 13 others injured Tuesday when a building collapsed in a residential neighborhood of Egypt's southern city of Luxor. The deaths include 2 children who died on the spot and a woman of German origin who succumbed to injuries soon after arriving at the hospital. The cause of the building collapse is not yet known. Time for a second break. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. Taliban leaders at the Afghanistan peace talks in Moscow, Russia, say they expect U.S. forces to leave their country as soon as possible. The Taliban say they hope the talks will bring an end to foreign occupation. Former Afghan President Hamid Karzai is mediating talks which started this week.
Armies, we are in negotiation with the American side, and we are trying that the American forces should go out as soon as it is possible.
When?
The time is not fixed so far and it's not agreed upon, but we are negotiating.
Principal issues and wishes were peace, stability, and Afghanistan free of foreign forces, and Afghanistan free of intervention from any side.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin is condemning the outgoing attacks on Russian media in the United Kingdom. Our correspondent Hans Eloro has more.
Russian TV news channels RT and Sputnik continue to be harassed in the United Kingdom. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov denounced the attacks and called for respect for Russia's mass media laws. Let's remember that last December Ofcom inspected RT in London. 7 of its programs were cancelled over a span of 6 weeks, and this was not the first time that RT was inspected. In April, there were accusations made against different RT programs, following the poisoning of ex-Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter. RT and Sputnik showed the other side of the story, that which wasn't being shown by the media in the UK, which was attempting to damage the international image of Russia. This is the result of an older strategy, when allegations were made in the US media during Barack Obama's administration, saying that Russian hackers leaked information compromising former US presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, Peskov has urged the Russian mass media regulatory body to inspect the BBC's programming in Russia, as the British government did with RT.
We thank Hansel for that report. At least 2 people were killed and 6 were hurt after an 8-story residential building collapsed in Istanbul on Wednesday. It is unclear what caused the collapse. People were registered in 14 apartments at the address, but authorities say the top 3 floors of the building were built illegally. There was also a textile workshop on the ground floor that was operating illegally. The U.S. House of Representatives has held its first hearing on gun violence in nearly 8 years. It comes a week ahead of the anniversary of the Florida school shooting in which a gunman killed 17 people at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. President Donald Trump has been criticized for not mentioning gun violence in his State of the Union address.
Do not fear being shot. Congress has done almost nothing in recent years to address gun violence. Citizens across the country have been organizing and demanding action. As a result, several states have strengthened their gun laws. I'm disappointed that in his lengthy State of the Union address last night, President Trump did not see fit even to mention the need to protect our citizens against gun violence. But it is evident from the energy in the crowd in this room, as well as the millions of people across the country fighting for sensible gun safety laws, that the public is demanding national legislation too.
Now let's take a look at other stories from around the world.
The lives of conjoined twins born in Yemen is at risk if they don't receive medical treatment abroad. Doctors have warned that the 2-week-old twins will die if they remain in the country, as its health system cannot keep them alive. However, the ongoing war has forced the closure of the capital's airport, so the boys are unable to leave. Doctors are appealing to the United Nations and humanitarian organizations to help arrange the transfer of the twins.
They need to travel immediately. They will not be able to survive in Yemen under the social, political, and economic circumstances in this country.
Thousands of teachers rallied in Al-Kasbah Square in Tunisia, near the Prime Minister's office, to demand better working conditions and higher salaries. Teachers' protests have been ongoing for 2 months, and exams have reportedly been boycotted, affecting thousands of students. It's something that's led parents to condemn the conflict between the government and the education sector. Previously, teacher demands for more money and a reduction in the retirement age were rejected due to the budgetary situation.
Firstly, this is the 6th demonstration which the secondary teachers are holding. Today we march towards the ministry, carrying banners and placards, asking that our demands are met. Then we went to the Al-Kasbah Square. Our main demands are educational reforms and early retirement for teachers.
A market in London that serves as a hub for the Latin American community is set to be torn down and replaced with luxury flats. The market will be bought by a private developer and demolished, despite opposition from traders and residents. Even United Nations human rights experts have warned of the effects that destroying the market would have on cultural life in the area.
And before we end, we are remembering Bob Marley Day. The date marks the birth of the late legendary Jamaican reggae artist. Marley's songs of revolution appealed to people of all cultures. He used reggae to expose and fight for the causes of the economically and politically oppressed. The reggae icon will have been 74 years old today.
All pirates, yes, they rabbi, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my end was.
And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.